Introduction, objectives, and statistics. Sarah was especially close to her father, so when she heard the news at age 6 that Dad would be going away, no longer to live with her, her mom, and her little brother, she was devastated. The judge gave her dad just 2 weekends a month with her. She later found that this pattern of organizing custody was common, but it felt like too long to wait. Moreover, when she was with her dad, he now seemed somehow distant and distracted, and couldn't be with her often enough to take interest in her school projects like he used to do. Sarah became sad and withdrawn at school. Teddy and Luke, ages 8 and 9 respectively when their parents split up, at first thought that it would be a good thing. They had hated the loud, horrible arguments between their parents, and often hid in the closet of Luke's bedroom, where they felt the safest, until after the shouting and threats had passed. Sometimes their father left, slamming the door. Other times, he simply passed out on the couch, as most of the arguments occurred when he was drunk, which happened with increasing frequency as the boys got into their school years. After the separation, though, they had to move to a poor neighborhood, into a one-bedroom apartment. They shared the bedroom. Their mother slept on the couch, and she became different, exhausted from all the extra hours she had to put in to keep them afloat financially. While the boys would later acknowledge that they had never gone hungry, they also couldn't afford to join in a lot of the fun stuff at school anymore. School camps, sports teams, and music lessons all carried a price tag over and above the normal school fees, and their mom just couldn't afford it. They would later learn that she had despaired of ever getting child support payments from her alcoholic ex. She carried the burden by herself, but the boys felt it keenly. They didn't want her to feel bad, so they stopped ever asking for things. Moira was 12 when her parents separated, divorcing soon after. She was required by the courts to spend at least 2 nights a week with her father for the next 6 years until she was 18. It's not that her father was a bad father. It was just that, prior to the divorce, he didn't seem to have much time or energy to give to her or her sisters, so she didn't feel like she had much relationship with him. If that was a bad situation before the divorce, afterwards it was even worse, as her father seemed to barely notice her and her sisters when they were with him. He would watch television, play video games, and talk to an endless stream of girlfriends on the phone, so Moira and her sisters were left to their own devices. While there was a silver lining for Moira in that she became very good at anticipating and caring for the needs of her little sisters, a trend that continued through their adult years, the damage to her was extensive. Later as an adult in counseling, she would understand how that lack of interest and attention from her father meant that she now would enter relationships with men who would seem to be attentive at first, but then soon become absorbed in their own lives, paying little attention to her. Relationship after relationship would fall over for Moira as she struggled to understand how an event which had occurred at least 10 years prior was affecting her so much now. Whether you read this as a mental health professional or someone who does not have a counseling, social work, or psychology qualification, you are likely to have run into similar situations in life, where there were no easy answers for how to deal with the falling out of love of a couple, and the fallout for their kids. This course looks into this situation that is now painfully common, given that about half of first-time marriages in the United States end in divorce. Beyond that, up to 60% of subsequent marriages in the two countries fall over as well. Many of these unions produce children, who then have an enormous adjustment to make. We examine the factors that make a divorce more difficult for children and those that facilitate resilience in the collateral damage to the children. When a marriage ends, we suggest strategies that mental health professionals can employ to strengthen children's adjustment and minimize the psychological damage they may sustain all the way into their adult years. Objectives upon successful completion of this course, you should be able to 1. Name the main effects on children at each age band of growth when their parents divorce. 2. Recall the main factors which increase risk for children whose parents are divorcing. 3. Recite the factors which promote resilience in children who experience parental divorce. 4. Identify appropriate strategies or interventions which you can employ as a mental health professional working to facilitate post-separation adjustment. A. Indirectly, through the child's parent. S. B. Directly, through helping the child see through institution's divorce. A few quick stats. So just how widespread is divorce and much are children involved in it? Demographics of divorce in the United States. The crude divorce rate, the number of divorces per 1,000 people in the population, in the U.S. rose from 2.2 in 1960 to 5.2 in 1980, a 136% increase. Amato, 2010. The rate then dropped gradually to 3.6 in 2006, a 31% decline. Demographers believe that about half of all marriages in the United States are voluntarily disrupted, that is, end in divorce or separation, although this varies among ethnic groups. Amato, 2010. Insofar as the children of these unions are concerned, 50% of all North American children will witness the divorce of their parents, with nearly half of these also seeing the breakup of a parent's second marriage. Childrenanddivorce.com, 2018. Reaction and risk during and after the breakup. Predictable reactions. Finding a way through the findings. Parenting experts are sometimes asked whether parents should stay together for the sake of the children or whether, if they divorce, it will affect the children, and if so, for how long, and in what ways. Research findings about the effects of divorce on children seem contradictory in places. Several points will help us to get a clear picture. 1. The factors that are relevant and the validity of results depend partly on the researcher's theoretical perspective or paradigm. Since the early years of the millennium, numerous theories have been advanced to understand the effects on children of divorce, notably family systems theory, life course theory, and social capital theory. Most of the constructs within these, however, have drawn on the notions of stress, coping, risk, and resilience and can be understood under the general umbrella of a divorce stress adjustment perspective. The motto, 2010. We will work primarily with notions of risk, resilience, and adjustment rather than explanations through any particular modality or theoretical perspective. 2. Most studies treat divorce as a single transition. Anyone who has been through it, whether child or adult, knows that there are multiple transitions to make, from where one sleeps at night to what school one goes to, what friends are available to be with, who can be called upon for support, and how much change one experiences in economic well-being. Beyond that, many parents remarry or begin to cohabit again, and these relationships, too, may break up, so there can be a seemingly unending stream of new people in both the parents' and the child's life. We will work with a perspective originally proposed in the 1990s, but which has gained steam since then, of divorce as a series of transitions. Capaldi and Patterson, 1991. This perspective will allow us to view the adjustment that children must make as a function or result of the number of transitions they must endure, rather than the divorce itself being the central variable. 3. In accordance with 2. We will attempt to incorporate the perspective, wherever possible, that divorce, as in the legal signing of papers to dissolve a marriage, is only a point on a long continuum of events that begins long before the actual divorce occurs, from the first time there is tension in the marriage until many years after the separation. Wallerstein's oft-cited study, 2005, followed a group of children of divorce from the 1970s to the 1990s, a total of 25 years, at which point many of the children continue to experience substantial expectations of failure, fear of loss, fear of change, and fear of conflict. Thus, we acknowledge that divorce can cast a net of effects with a very wide timeline. Reactions by age band. No matter what the circumstances are, divorce is almost always stressful for a child. It means huge changes in the lives of children and the loss of a child's family, that institution that has heretofore been at the center of their universe. Most children do not want their parents to separate, unless the marriage was full of intense conflict and anger, or held other sources of misery not suitable for children to witness. After a breakup, parent-child relationships can be strained. There is likely to be less contact with one of the parents, and possibly a complete loss of contact. There are economic hardships, and sometimes the stress of legal conflicts, as we will detail below. Children of divorce are also at risk of psychological and behavioral problems. For children, it is a scary, confusing, and frustrating time. Emery, and E. Morin, 2018. Meyer, 2018. With a multitude of factors determining how traumatic a divorce is ultimately going to be for the children involved in it. The effects differ in part according to what stage of development children are at. Preschoolers, fear, guilt, and loss of safety. A typical reaction of preschoolers to a breakup is that of fear, guilt, and confusion. They do not understand what is happening, or why it needs to happen. There is the ever-present fear that if dad and mom stopped loving one another, either or both could stop loving the child as well. The very young child questions who will take of him or her now, whether there will be enough money, where they will now live, and how things will be. Think about it like this. Children were given their lives by their parents, so it is natural for them to see those parents as all-powerful, capable of solving any problem, and miraculously working in their ability to meet their children's needs. The child's world is a dependent one, closely connected to parents who are favored companions. Children are heavily reliant on parental care and experience family as the major locus of their social life. When a divorce occurs, children's belief in the all powerful capability of their parents to resolve issues is shattered, and with it, the sense of basic safety and ability of their parents to make decisions that truly promote their well being. The divorce shakes trust and dependency on parents, who now behave in often highly undependable ways. Moreover, when the one right family configuration of mom and dad together with their kids is no longer reality, the child experiences a type of betrayal or conflict concerning their basic understanding of life. In response, many preschoolers will regress to earlier behaviors: bedwetting, needing a security blanket, masturbating, crying, clinging, and or disobeying may reappear, along with night fears or fears at separation. Children may imagine strange reasons for which one parent is now gone. They may think that it is they who caused the breakup, and that it would not have happened if they had only behaved better. If a parent is very upset, the child may hide his or her feelings so as not to upset the parent further. Picard, 2011. Gordon and Arbuthnot, 2018. Young children, ages 6-8, grief, yearning, and loyalty conflicts. The most common reaction of young children is that of grief, which is expressed through crying and sobbing, boys more than girls. Along with that, children will yearn deeply for the absent parent, even if their relationship with that parent wasn't very close before the breakup. Interestingly, along with the yearning, there is often anger, but because the child does not see the absent parent much, the anger is typically expressed against the custodial parent, blaming him or her, mostly a her, the mother, for the absence of the other parent. If the non custodial parent reduces the amount of contact time or abandons contact altogether, the child often comes to believe that that parent has stopped loving him or her, and the resultant reaction causes emotional trauma. At this age, children hope that their parents will get back together. They fantasize, using wishful thinking to help allay the pain of their loss. Children of this age group tend to hold on to hope of a parental reunion much longer than adolescents do. They may even take on trying to bring the parents back together, attempting to solve their problems. Such a role reversal is, of course, not healthy. Given how impressionable children are at this age, it is not surprising to hear that children's mindset for how people deal with conflict is formed, well, malformed, from the fights they have watched their parents engage before and possibly now during a breakup. Children get worn down both emotionally and physically from a lot of fighting. More importantly, however, if there has been physical fighting and violence, children begin to copy their parents and hit others. Finally, children of this age group can be subject to terrible tugs of war between parents, as parents try to get the child to take sides. While it might work in the short run, creating alienation from one parent or the other, children seriously dislike such tactics, and later come to resent the parents who use them. Picard, 2011. Gordon and Arbuthnot, 2018. Preteens, ages 9-12. Distress, anger, health issues, and acting out. By the time a child is a preteen, he or she can understand some of the reasons for the breakup and, to some extent, see both sides. There is still, however, a basic inability to hold a point of tension between the two parents' views, resulting in black and white thinking and making one parent the good guy and the other the bad guy. Although going back and forth between who is good and who is bad, 1 in 4 kids at this age will side with one parent, usually the mother, and sometimes forego asking for more time with the non-custodial parent, even though they miss that parent, because they believe it will upset the custodial parent. This age group, like their younger counterparts, may yearn for the parents to get back together, as well as distress. Children of this age are able to feel their anger over the breakup, and may also suffer from a shaken sense of self. The stress of such intense emotions seems to show up at the doctor's office, with many health complaints such as infections, headaches, stomach aches, and asthma. Doctors report that children from homes which have experienced separation come to their offices more frequently than children from intact homes. Gordon and Arbuthnot, 2018. Sadly, children of this age whose parents divorce may also experience interpersonal problems with peers. The children may fear being rejected, and actually have fewer friends than before. This is certainly true if the child must relocate and start over with friendships in a new school. The peers whose company is then sought may be other children who have been rejected, so the greater prevalence of this dynamic may lead to emotional or behavioral problems, such as truancy or failing school, breaking laws, engaging in risky sex, or drug or alcohol abuse. Another way preteens can act out is by hurting or getting back at their parents, by whom they feel let down. They may accuse them of moral lapses, abandonment, or merely changing. They may say unkind things, or even refuse to spend time with the parent whom they now see as guilty. Gordon and Arbuthnot, 2018. Adolescents, ages 13-19, Independence and Aggression. Carl Pickard, 2011, notes how different the response of adolescents to divorce is from that of younger children, commenting how divorce tends to intensify a child's dependence, but accelerate the adolescent's independence. It tends to elicit a more aggressive response in the child and a more aggressive response in the adolescent. This seems natural when we consider the developmental work that children must do to individuate, and which adolescents have partially completed. Children's lives revolve around their family, whereas teenagers have become more oriented towards their friends, with the major focus of their social life outside the family. The surgical division of a home into two households, back and forth between which the child must now shuttle, creates instability and insecurity. Young children's regressive behaviors could be viewed as a way of reverting to former functioning so that the parental caregiving that occurred then might be forthcoming again now. The more independent-minded adolescents, conversely, tend to react more aggressively, figuring that since the parents seem to have failed to keep their original commitments, they, too, are no longer bound to former commitments, and thus they are justified in disregarding family rules and discipline as they now look out for themselves. The adolescent way of taking back some control is thus to distance themselves even more from the parents and the family, acting in mad, rebellious ways and becoming increasingly autonomous. They are now determined to live life their way. Picard, 2011. Young adults, anger, sadness, disappointment, and working out the holidays. Divorce rates among older married couples in the United States nearly doubled between 1980 and 2008. Greenthal, 2017. This divorcing cohort often leaves in its wake adult children who must figure out the meaning of this major event for themselves and often their children, the grandchildren of the divorcing couple. Common reactions among adults in their 20s and even 30s to their parents' middle-aged divorce are those of anger, sadness, and disappointment, as much as the divorcing parents might hope that their now grown offspring will take the change in stride. These adults are, after all, still children when it comes to their parents. The children must also acknowledge the sense of shock and loss that no longer will there be a family home in the same way as before, especially if parents decide to sell the one that has been shared for so many years. Where with under 18 children the custody arrangements take care of when the child is with each parent, the adult children now have to decide for themselves whether birthdays, Christmases, and other special occasions are to be spent with mom or with dad. If an adult child is in relationship with someone whose parents are also divorced, there is the potential for 4 sets of parents to be visited on those special days. Adult children, particularly those whose relationship might be going through a bad patch, may wonder whether they, too, are headed for divorce, or they may question their ability to sustain an intimate, harmonious relationship. Finally, when middle-aged divorcing parents begin to date and partner again, it can trigger multiple issues for the adult children. Greenthal, 2018, not the least of which, in some cases, is adjusting to a parent's partner who may be about their own age. The risk factors that make for poorer outcomes. Having laid out the typical reactions children have to divorce at various ages, we can look in general at the risk factors that are increased through the experience of divorce. We caution that understanding the plethora of research results on the topic is not an easy task, with one study seemingly contradicting another, and everything is overlaid by the question of time frame, whether the risk occurs in the short, medium, or long-term period after separation or divorce. An additional caveat is that it is easy to fall into a view that has held sway for most of the latter half of the 20th century, namely, that parental divorce is the cause of a range of serious and enduring behavioral and emotional problems in children and adolescents. Divorced families have been widely portrayed by the media, mental health professionals, and even politicians as thoroughly flawed environments, whereas intact families, with mom, dad, and all the kids, have been seen as wholesome and nurturing. Although on average children may fare better in a happy, two-parent home than in a divorced family, 2 points must be made. 1. Many two-parent families do not offer a happy environment for either the parents or the children. Amato, Loomis, and Booth, 1995. 2. The majority of children from divorced families are emotionally well-adjusted. Amato, 2001. Hetherington, 1999. Continuing social science and mental health studies have underscored how deeply complex the structures are which determine how healthy or happy a child will be in the context of experiencing separation. Divorce, as noted earlier, The wisest course of action seems to be to view divorce as a series of transitions. We can look at them as they occur in the context of the child's continuing development. Capaldi and Patterson, 1991. Amato, 2010. Stress of the initial separation. Many of the reactions we detailed above for the various age bands of the child could also be categorized as resultant stress from the initial separation. For some children, the stress began at an earlier point in their timeline due to chronic high parental conflict or violence in the marriage. Many children, though, seem to have little emotional preparation for their parents' announcement, and they react with various expressions of distress, anxiety, anger, shock, and disbelief. Hetherington and Klingenpeel, 1992. Lack of communication complicating kids' efforts to cope with the major changes wrought by separation is the problem that most children are inadequately informed by their parents about the separation and divorce. Given that the parents' bandwidth is tied up with managing their own emotions and also practical aspects of the change, children are often left to struggle alone with the meaning of this huge event for their lives. They feel isolated and experience emotional and cognitive confusion. Kelly and Emery, 2003. Typically, parents do not even communicate with each other regarding effective custody and access arrangements, and they seem even less able to give information to their children about both short-term and longer-term changes to happen in the family structure, the living arrangements, and even how the parent-child relationships will be. Joan Kelly and Robert Emery cite a study of parent-child communications about divorce in which nearly one-fourth of the children said no one spoke to them about the divorce, and fully 45% reported being given one or two sentence explanations, such as "your father is leaving." Only 5% reported being fully informed and given the opportunity to ask questions. Dunn, Davis, O'Connor, and Sturgis, 2001. Coping with departure and shuttling. In a third broad category of initial stressor is the need to adjust to the often abrupt departure of one parent, typically the father, and subsequent periods of infrequent or even zero contact with that parent. Because court-ordered custody arrangements may not yet be in place, some children may not see the non-resident parent for weeks or months, a period too long for young children, especially in cases where there has been a strong attachment to the parent. Gordon and Arbuthnot, 2018. The prolonged absence is highly distressing for children, even after regular visits begin. However, there is stress. Children must begin to adapt to the shuttle logistics of going back and forth between mom's place and dad's. At least one of the places will be unfamiliar in a physical sense, and the children must get used to the new schedules and requirements to be at a particular place at a particular time, imposed on them without their consultation in the grand majority of cases. They need to work out which clothes, toys, games, and items they will keep at each house. Moreover, the two spaces they will now live in are different psychologically, with different rules and procedures and different emotional climates. They must integrate all of these differences and carry on with the unaccustomed absence of one parent, regardless of which home they are in, and the sudden inability to communicate at will with whichever parent they prefer. Very young children do not have the cognitive and emotional maturity to formulate questions in order to understand and cope with the changes, and research is now discovering how the common court-ordered solution of seeing the non-custodial parent for 2 weekends a month does not meet the needs of many children. Kelly and Lamb, 2000. Kelly and Emery, 2003. Parental conflict. A principal stressor for children is conflict between parents that continues post-separation and even after divorce. Pre-separation and post-separation conflict. While it is tempting to assume that parents who were in major conflict before the separation will continue to be so after the separation, with continuing effects on the children, research has shown that this is not necessarily the case. Approximately 20 to 25% of children experience high conflict during their parents' marriage. While some couples continue in high conflict entrenched patterns after the divorce, others reduce their conflict once separated divorced, such that about 25% of divorced couples report low conflict. Booth and Amato, 2001. Hetherington, 1999. When the Huffington Post gathered responses to the question of how children themselves were affected by their parents' divorce, they reported 7 major categories of response. Most of these had to do with parental conflict. One type of reply was exemplified by the child that wrote about what a sense of relief it was not to be experiencing all the conflict anymore. Wang, 2014. Some parents' rage, however, is ignited by the separation itself. Thus, children's experience of parental conflict in the divorce process varies widely, with some children experiencing continuing high levels of conflict and others seeing a settling down of this. Kelly and Emery, 2003. Studies have repeatedly demonstrated the correlation between strong marital conflict and children's poor adjustment. Arkowitz and Lilienfeld, 2013. But what about the relationship between post-divorce conflict and children's adjustment? Findings from this latter category have been mixed. Booth and Amato, 2001, reported no association between post-divorce conflict and later adjustment in young adults, but Hetherington, 1999, found that post-divorce conflict had more adverse effects than did conflict in the married families. The different findings are likely to be a function of different measures of conflict and adjustment, a lack of differentiation between types of conflict and styles of conflict resolution, and the amount of direct exposure children had to anger and conflict. Kelly and Emery, 2003. When parents put kids in the middle, one subcategory in which results are not controversial is that of the effect on children when parents do any of the following. 1. Use children to express their anger. 2. Be aggressive either on the phone or in person. 3. Ask children to carry hostile messages to the other partner. 4. Denigrate the other parent in front of the child, or forbid mention of that parent in their presence. Not surprisingly, children who experienced these parental behaviors were more depressed and anxious than their counterparts whose parents had also had high conflict, but left the child out of the angry exchanges. Buchanan, Maccabee, and Ornbush, 1991. This behavior of involving children in the conflict comprised another of the 7 categories of child response to the Huffington Post inquiry about effects on them of divorce. As a daughter whose father had weekend custody of her said, "The hardest part was listening to all the crap he said about my mom. He still does it to this day." Wong, 2014. Fortunately, several studies also show that, even when parents continued to have high conflict with each other, the children did not differ from those whose parents had no or low conflict if the parents did not put the children in the middle of their conflict. Buchanan et al., 1991. Hetherington, 1999. We note here that it is not always two enraged parents in conflict. Sometimes there can be one angry, defiant parent in combination with one who has disengaged emotionally, is no longer angry, and is trying to keep conflict from the child. Kelly and Emery, 2003. Poor parenting after divorce. Inevitably, in the year or two after a separation divorce, parents need to put their lives back together again, financially, socio-emotionally, and sexually. The parent is still establishing a post-separation way of dealing with the other parent, at least in terms of co-parenting, and possibly also because of legal issues to still be worked through. The parent may have to sell a house, buy or rent a new place, get a new job, and possibly relocate. At the same time, the rejection or abandonment inherent in a separation divorce experience is an affront to the ego, and often, to the parent's sense of masculinity or femininity, that seems best assuaged by finding new romantic company which does find the parent attractive and interesting. All of this means that post-separation parenting is sometimes seen as diminished or inept. Kelly and Emery, 2003. As parents tending to their own issues have less time and energy for the normal demands of their children, let alone the extra demands from the child due to the stress of the separation. The increased demands to the parent as a result of integrating single parenting, work, and social needs means that parents have a heightened risk of emotional lability, depression, alcoholism, drug abuse, and psychosomatic complaints compared with married parents. Some preteen and adolescent children become the sole emotional support for their needy parents. Moreover, boys experience deterioration in their home environment more than girls, partly because their fathers, now often absent, tended to spend more time with them than with their daughters, particularly with respect to high conflict marriages. Children have been reported to experience less positive involvement with their custodial parent, usually their mother, experiencing less affection, less time spent with them, and harsher discipline. They often experience their fathers as withdrawing more from and engaging in more intrusive interactions. Krishnakumar and Beeler, 2000. Hetherington, 1999. Kelly and Emery, 2003. The particular negative effects of divorce for children's adjustment over the medium and longer term, especially when diminished parenting is occurring, may include that children from divorced families are, twice as likely to have mental health problems, regardless of age, gender, or culture. Adjustment disorders, depression, and anxiety rates are generally higher than for children whose parents are married. Twice as likely to exhibit behavioral and externalizing problems, such as conduct disorders, delinquency, and impulsive behaviors than children from two-parent families. More than twice as likely to have problems with depression and mood disorders. less likely to perform well academically, scoring lower on achievement tests, having higher truancy rates, and being twice as likely to drop out of high school before graduating, more likely to take risks, such as engaging in substance use, early sexual activity, drinking earlier, and reporting higher alcohol, marijuana, tobacco, and drug use than peers whose parents are married, twice as likely to divorce as adults, less socially competent, staying longer in adolescence before moving into adulthood. Meyer, 2018. Morin, 2018. Hetherington, 1999. Amato, 2001. Pong and Ju, 2000. The preceding paragraphs refer to the effects on parenting, and through that, on children, for parents who were more or less functional at the outset of the separation. Yet not all parents had reasonable mental health going into the separation. Studies have shown that living with a disturbed, character disordered, or severely depressed parent post-divorce places a child at risk, and is associated with impaired emotional, social, and academic adjustment. Emery, Waldron, Kitzman, and Aaron, 1999. Hetherington, 1999. After divorce, the now non-resident parent has few opportunities to buffer the effects of the disorder behaviors of emotionally troubled custodial parents. The influence of the healthier, non-resident parent on children's adjustment diminishes as time goes on. Hetherington, 1999. Loss of important relationships. If there is any area that is a minefield of issues for all parties post-separation divorce, the question of maintaining important relationships, and how to deal with the gradual erosion of them, is probably it. As we have noted throughout this course, children from divorced families face the risk of loss, or at least erosion, of multiple important relationships, with close friends, with extended family, especially on the non-custodial parent's side, and mostly, with the non-custodial parent, who is usually the child's father, where the child saw dad every day before, as he now sees him 4 days a month. Typically, this leads to fathers having a diminished role in the child's life, concomitant with a sense in the child of that parent's reduced importance and a lessening of the closeness and meaning associated with that parent-child relationship. Kelly and Lamb, 2000. Moreover, reduced father involvement after divorce has been linked to conduct problems, particularly for boys, whereas greater amounts of paternal involvement in children's school activities was associated with better academic functioning and behavior, including mores, fewer suspensions, and a more positive attitude toward school, compared with children whose fathers were less involved. Pruitt, Williams, Isabella, and Little, 2003, Nord, Brimhall, and West, 1997. Parental barriers. A reduced role of father in the child's life seems all but inevitable if we recall the dynamics of the section above on diminished parenting. While some non-custodial parents may voluntarily reduce their involvement with children post-separation due to their own personality or parenting deficits, it is also highly likely that there are interparental and institutional barriers. For start, parents, especially fathers who may not have been involved much with the children during the marriage, become distracted by new partners after the separation. Some have expressed a feeling that the reduced contact with children is so painful that it leads to cutting off contact altogether. Still others question how to do the parenting role when they are only part-time parents. Kruk, 1992. Maternal barriers. The role of the child's mother in children's contact with their father, when he is the non-resident parent, is major as well. When mom gets remarried, contact with dad typically goes down, even if mothers do not remarry. However, they have been termed the gatekeepers of contact with the father. Mother's hostility at the beginning of the divorce predicts less visitation and fewer overnights of the children with their father 3 years later. Maccabee and Nurkin, 1992. One study found that 25-35% of custodial mothers interfere with or sabotage visiting. Unfortunately, maternal anger and dissatisfaction with higher levels of father contact, regardless of conflict level, is associated with poorer adjustment in children, compared to children whose mothers were satisfied with high father involvement. King and Hurd, 1999. What we don't know is whether the mother's dissatisfaction was caused by poor fathering or by their own anger with their ex-spouse. Institutional barriers. Even if a child's mother does not object to the father's continuing involvement with his children, the father may be prevented from having much contact by the courts, who have traditionally awarded most of the custody to the mother, with, typically, 2 weekends, 4 days, a month for visitation with the father, even though this formulaic response has been shown not to meet the needs of many children. Kelly, 2007. In fact, Boys tend to want more time with their father than is traditionally negotiated or ordered, and research by Hetherington, 1999, has shown that children and young adults describe the loss of contact with a parent as the primary negative aspect of divorce. Non-resident mothers tend to visit their children more frequently, assuming more parental functions, and less frequently ceasing contact. Hetherington, 1999, than fathers do. This may be due in part to the different expectations our society has of mothers than fathers. Children presenting barriers. Sometimes the children themselves influence how involved their fathers are with them post-divorce, for both sound and inappropriate reasons. In cases where there has been violence or abuse during the marriage, children, in their fear and anger, may refuse or reluctantly agree to visit their fathers. This may be a healthy choice, especially given that the estrangement is likely to have happened during the marriage, while the abuse was being perpetrated. In other cases, children would prefer not to visit with mentally ill, narcissistic, or character disordered parents whose disinterest in lack of parenting, relational ability interferes with parent-child relationship building. Finally, some children may refuse to visit a parent with whom they had an adequate relationship previously because the other parent may have alienated them, sabotaging the relationship. The rejected parent's personality or parenting deficits might need to be factored into the equation as well here. Jaffe, Crooks, and Bala, 2005. Johnston, 1993. Mostly, the barriers against seeing one parent or the other are a result of myriad interwoven factors, including the parent's personality problems and lack of parenting skills, the hostile, denigrating actions of a still, angry parent encouraging alienation, court-ordered and other institutional barriers, and the child's own anger and vulnerability, all of which is overlaid with the extreme hostility that is sadly common in the adversarial processes of divorce. Trouble and the bank balance. Academics writing about divorce are fairly consistent in reporting that divorce significantly reduces the standard of living for custodial parents and children, but that also occurs to a lesser degree for the non-custodial parent. Census Bureau surveys in the United States several years ago reported that 1/3 of custodial parents entitled to support by court order are not receiving it. San Francisco Chronicle, 2002. In Kelly and Emery, 2003. The Australian Bureau of Statistics, 1999, reported that 42% of divorced families were receiving cash child support payments, although no statistics turned up to say what percentage should have been receiving the payments. Although divorce is generally blamed for the decline in income in divorced families, it is also true that marriages that end in divorce are more likely to have lower income prior to separation compared with parents who did not divorce in the same period. Peng and Ju, 2000. Divorce, then, just accelerates a lower standard of living. The consequences for the children reside mostly in disruptive changes in residence, often including a change in school, and consequent changes in child care arrangements and friends. Booth and Amato, 2001, found that 46% of young adults recalled moving in the year following separation. Children receiving child care support or possibly not receiving it when they were entitled to it find their reduced standard of living showing up in the inability of their custodial parent to pay for extras such as sports, music and other lessons, and membership in organizations that were meaningful to them before the separation. This is partly because, even when non-custodial parents pay what they are supposed to pay, the support payments are generally structured to cover only the basics. When there is high conflict and lack of cooperation between the parents, the entitled payments, albeit basic, often do not arrive at all. Kelly and Emery, 2003. Remarriage and repartnering. The stream of partners to adjust to their parental need to rebuild social life is likely to mean many new people whose presence the child must adjust to. As mom and dad try on new potential partners to see how they fit, the child is caught up in having to work out how to be with people whose status may be unclear. The continuing series of changes and disruptions in family and emotional relationships as parents date, cohabit, remarry, and redivorce means a concomitant series of attachments and then losses for children. The long-term effect of this may be that they are hindered as adults in forming more mature and intimate attachments. Wallerstein, 2005. Kelly and Emery, 2003. Estimates are that 3 in 4 divorced men and 2/3 of divorced women in the United States eventually remarry. About 50% of divorced adults in the U.S. cohabit before remarriage, with others cohabiting instead of marriage. Bumpass, Sweet, and Castro Martin, 1990. For many children, coming into the step family or later, blended family environment is as conflicted and stressful as the initial separation. and may be particularly painful for children when it is entered into very soon after the divorce. Hetherington and Klingenpeel, 1992. Hetherington and Kelly, 2002. Wallerstein's long-term effects, anxiety and fear of failure in love and marriage. While much of the literature about the effects of divorce on children focuses on the short and medium-term effects, as we've detailed in the preceding sections, one frequently cited study has been associated with long-term effects: the 25-year longitudinal research of Judith Wallerstein, beginning in the 1970s with a group of 131 children and their parents from the time of the family's marital breakup until the children reached full adulthood. Wallerstein repeatedly interviewed the children at separation, before the legal divorce, at 18 months, and then 5, 10, 15, and 25 years afterwards, at the time of her article, Growing Up in the Divorced Family. Wallerstein, 2005. The children, between the ages of 3 and 13 at the start of the research, were 28 to 43 years old. In stating her conclusions, Wallerstein noted that the prevailing paradigm for understanding the impact of divorce on children held the premise that divorce represents an acute crisis from which resilient children recover, typically within a 12-year period, and then resume normal developmental progress if three conditions obtain. 1. That parents are able to settle their differences without fighting. 2. Financial arrangements are fair. And 3. The child has continued contact with both parents over the years that follow. Her findings concurred that children were better protected in these circumstances than when they did not occur. But she also reported that a civil or even cooperative relationship between the parents did not shield the children from suffering intense anxiety and fear of failure in love and marriage when they reached late adolescence and young adulthood. One contributing factor was lack of input the children had to decisions concerning them in regard to access and visitation. The legal system's failure to acknowledge children's changing developmental needs and increasing needs to be consulted was associated with powerlessness, anger, and poor self-esteem in adulthood. She also found that, regardless of the type of custody, sole or joint, when passions of the litigation were at play, the children became anxious as adults. Wallerstein did acknowledge that the anxiety and fear of failure were found to be specific to domains of intimate relationships, and that her children of divorce were not adversely affected in the workplace by the divorce, with some claiming to do better as a result of the divorce due to skills in independent thinking and dealing with difficult people and adversity that they had developed. But she stressed that the dominant paradigm needed to shift regarding the impact of divorce on children toward inclusion of its very long-term, even lifelong, effects in close relationships. Wallerstein, 2005. Summary with 1 and 2. In the U.S., marriages ending in divorce and about half of those divorces in both countries involving children. We face a significant social phenomenon which has a major impact on the children involved. From preschool to adulthood, children who experience divorce go through a major upheaval with multiple requirements for adjustment. From the shock of the initial separation through likely remarriages and even redivorces, the effect on children of divorce is not as a single event, but a series of transitions. While some research claims that the effects of a divorce will inevitably be with children into their adult years. Wallerstein, Lewis, Ann Blakesley, 2000. Wallerstein, 2005. Other research shows that most children of divorce do become well-adjusted adults, with only about 15% more adult children of divorce experiencing problems over and above those from stable families. Hetherington and Kelly, 2002. In the next chapter, we examine the protective factors which may mitigate the effects of divorce, the factors that help reduce the risk given the factors outlined in the previous chapter which tend to increase the risk of poor outcomes for children of divorce. It is not difficult to predict which factors will act protectively, decreasing the risk for such children. They are mostly the opposites. We look at competent parenting, the role of the non-resident parent, diminished conflict between parents, and particular qualities of children. Competent parenting research is consistent on the finding that, both during marriage and after divorce, one of the most potent protective factors a child can experience is that his or her custodial parent, usually the mother, is psychologically well adjusted and thus able to provide quality parenting. Hetherington, 1999. Kelly and Emery, 2003. Arkowitz and Lilienfeld, 2013. When we say quality parenting, what do we mean? A competent parent is shown in numerous research studies to do the following: provide warmth and emotional support. Many mothers were perceived to become cold, strict disciplinarians who were more rejecting of their children after experiencing high conflict marriages. Hetherington, 1999. Krishnikumaran Beeler, 2000. That may be a natural result of mother's personal disappointment, increased load in life after separation, or other factors, but it does not help the children struggling to cope. Maintain healthy communication. Children who experience fuller, more open communication and consultation are likely to feel met and adjust better to the divorce. For example, when there is adequate communication about the divorce, or when arrangements are made in consultation with the child about visitation times, a healthy parent-child relationship has been shown to help children develop higher self-esteem and better academic performance following divorce. Morin, 2018. Adequately monitor children, especially teens. Parents can be asked, do you know where your children are right now? Do you know what they are doing? Although it is challenging for parents dealing with greatly accelerated life challenges after a breakup, paying close attention to teens, and to those with whom they hang out, may mean fewer academic problems and a reduced chance of them using alcohol or other substances. Morin, 2018. Discipline authoritatively. No more can mother differ discipline with. Wait until your father gets home. No more can dad look perplexed and say, ask your mother. While it is particularly difficult for the non-resident parent to establish discipline in the relatively fewer hours the children are with him, usually the father, it is important. Equally, resident mothers must now be willing to be the authority who says no and means it, who follows through on disciplinary measures, and who understands that children do not actually want a friend. They want a parent. Maintain age-appropriate expectations. Many are the stories of children who take on extra responsibilities as parent surrogates when their parents are buckling under the weight of post-divorce needs. The Huffington Post inquiry to which we referred earlier, Wang, 2014, had 7 categories of response that children made about the effects on them of divorce. In one category, many observed that, while they may have been acting out at school, they took on more responsibility at home. One 10-year-old said that, although his bullying had greatly increased since the divorce, he had gotten very protective of his younger sister. Wang, 2014. In another report, a successful businessman said that he confided in his 3-year-old son, talking to him for hours. He understands everything I say, asserted the father. Wallerstein, the researcher psychologist to whom the father said this, realized that there was a different take on this father-son interaction when she brought the 3-year-old into her office. In a conversation about the boy's relationship with his father, the boy repeatedly enacted a small car being run over by a Mack truck. Wallerstein, 2005. In the case of both the 10-year-old protective big brother and the understanding 3-year-old son, the children were laboring under age-inappropriate expectations. Empower children when the family structure collapses. So, too, does kids' sense of self-esteem. Amid the swirling energies of conflict and change, children can feel like helpless victims and doubt their ability to cope, ushering in mental health problems immediately or in the longer term. Parents can help by showing them that, although divorce and all the changes are difficult to deal with, they are mentally strong and resilient enough to make the adjustments to the new life. Morin, 2018. Teach specific coping skills along with the parental skill of empowering children. Competent parents are able to isolate particular coping skills that individual children may need and teach them. Morin, 2018. This could involve anything from helping them formulate explanations to tell everyone at school about the divorce to ways to self-soothe when they feel down. Hetherington, 1999. Krishnikumaran Beeler, 2000. Kelly and Emery, 2003. Active non-resident parenting. If the non-resident parent, normally the father, is able to engage timely, appropriate parenting, there is a protective effect for children. Timely does not refer to frequency of visits, as this is an unreliable predictor of child outcomes due to not taking into account quality of visit. Assuming there is low parental conflict, frequent visits between fathers and children is associated with better adjustment, although those same frequent visits are associated with poorer adjustment in the case of high parental conflict, presumably because there are more opportunities for children to be directly exposed to parental aggression or pressures. Hetherington and Kelly, 2002. Frequent contact also had a protective effect when certain other features were present. Amato and Gilbreth, 1999, conducted a meta-analysis of 57 studies and found that children who had close relationships with their parents benefited from frequent contact when their fathers remained actively involved as parents. Involvement included fathers helping with homework and projects and providing authoritative parenting and age-appropriate expectations, as noted above. In these cases, children had more positive adjustment and academic performance than did children with less involved fathers. Nord, Brimhall, and West found that fathers' involvement with school was also correlated with better grades and fewer repeated grades and suspensions. 1997. Finally, in this category, Manning, 2002, found that the combination of fathers engaging in activities with their children and providing financial support was associated with increased probability of completing high school and entering university compared with activities alone or in combination with very low financial support. Joint custody arrangements. While judges have traditionally awarded the lion's share of custody to mothers in most cases, recent trends have seen judges and family tribunals taking more account of the father's need to be involved with his children and awarding joint custody or closer to it than before, more frequently, with benefits accruing to the children. In a meta-analysis of 33 sole and joint custody studies, children in joint custody arrangements were better adjusted on multiple measures, including general adjustment, emotional and behavioral adjustment, and academic achievement, compared with children in sole custody arrangements. Wasserman, 2002. In Kelly and Emery, 2003. The joint custody adjustment advantage obtained regardless of level of parental conflict, and the children did not differ in adjustment level from still married families. These changes may be reflecting changes in both legal trends and social contexts, which increasingly acknowledge the value of paternal time and involvement with children. 2. Mothers were shown in a study several years ago to be happier with high paternal involvement than they were 20 years prior to the study. King and Hurd, 1999. These findings relate to the next protective factor: reduced conflict between parents after divorce. In study after study, results show consistently that low parental conflict is a protective factor for children after divorce. Even when there is high parental conflict, a protective factor occurs for children if any of these conditions obtain. The child has a good relationship with at least one parent or another caregiver. There is parental warmth, or parents are able to encapsulate their conflict, shielding the children from it. Hetherington, 1999. At least one study found no differences in the amount of conflict between parents in sole or joint custody arrangements. Emery et al., 1999. But this contradicts results from the meta-analysis by Blasserman, 2002, in Kelly and Emery, 2003, in which sole custody families were found to have more conflict both before and after divorce. Parents who don't disengage. Most parents diminish their conflict with each other in the first several years after the divorce, as they establish their separate lives, including, sometimes, remarriage to others. Results of investigations indicate, however, that a small proportion, between 8% and 12% of parents, continue high conflict. In refusing to disengage and move on, they use a disproportionate amount of court resource and time, chronically behaving in contentious, vengeful ways. In these cases, children are more likely to be exposed to parental aggression, and expert mediators suggest trying to limit children's exposure to parental conflict through access arrangements incorporating transfers at neutral points, such as school or daycare. Kelly and Emery, 2003. Co-parenting versus parallel parenting. Related to transferring children between parents, there is the matter of the co-parental relationship and its effects on children post-separation. Between 1/4 and on a third of parents have a cooperative co-parenting relationship, one which includes joint planning, flexibility, adequate communication, and the capacity to coordinate activities and schedules. While this seems to be the best case scenario for children, there is another style in which children also thrive: parallel parenting. More than half of parents engage in this latter style, characterized by low conflict, low communication, and emotional disengagement. It works for children when parents offer nurturing care and appropriate discipline in their respective households. Hetherington, 1999. Hetherington and Kelly, 2002. Resilient qualities of children. So far, we have mostly examined, and research has mostly examined, the effects of divorce on children given a multitude of factors external to the child, such as how many transitions children must make, whether parents engage in high or low conflict, and practical questions such as the standard of living. What about qualities residing in the child him herself? Arkowitz and Lilienfeld, 2013, observe that certain characteristics of the child can influence resilience. Those who tend to fare better are children with an easygoing temperament, those who are good problem solvers, and those who seek out social support when they need it as part of their coping style. How therapists can facilitate adjustment in children of divorce. Divorce is an issue that is fraught with intense emotion, blind sides, institutional shortcomings, and a powerful capacity to affect offspring for several generations. Yet there are things that parents can do to mitigate its most scarring effects. And further, there are things that therapists can do, some of them with parents, toward the same goal, lessening the negative effects on the children. In this chapter, we examine how therapists can help at three broad levels, with messages for parents, messages for children, and changes at a systemic or institutional level. Messages to parents. We begin with the level probably most accessible to a majority of therapists, the parents, concerned about their children and not wanting them to be a casualty of the parents seeking a better life for themselves. Mothers and fathers may be open to hearing about how they can diminish the effects of the divorce on their children, from shielding children from parental conflict to recognizing when they need to get help themselves. Parents are majorly powerful in the dance of separation, divorce, and readjustment. Encapsulate the conflict. Whether still angry or not, the number one strategy, to be communicated ad nauseum to parents, is that intense parental conflict which children observe as harmful conflict. The effects may show up immediately at the child's school, as when children become bullies, become shy and withdrawn, or do much worse academically than before, or they may manifest when the child becomes an adult with significant relational problems. But wherever or however the problems turn up, research is most clear on this point. They will, as we have been reporting throughout this course. Researchers have consistently found that high levels of parental conflict during and after a divorce are associated with poorer adjustment in children, the only exception being when the conflict was so intense that children are relieved and do better after the conflict situation is dissolved. Arkowitz and Lilienfeld, 2013, Booth and Amato, 2001, Hetherington, 1999, Kelly and Emery, 2003. Detail hurtful behaviors as a therapist meeting with either or sometimes both. Parents, it is your duty to be exceedingly clear about how the parents' lack of impulse control, that is, their conflict in front of the children, is likely to be the thing that most damages the progeny they say they love, even more than the actual divorce itself. You can point out some of the behaviors which parents may not have connected with hurtful parenting practices. 1. Shouting, blaming one another, calling each other names, criticizing, or in any way bad-mouthing the other parent, either when that parent is present or when alone with the child. 2. Refusing to cooperate with agreed pickups, drop-offs, or other planned coordinated activities. 3. Complaining about what the other parent does or does not do now post-separation. Encourage parents to communicate politely and privately to one another about that. Or if the issue is highly contentious, such as the question of continued child support, suggest that the upset parent speak to the other through a mediator or lawyer. Parents engaging high conflict need to be made aware of the research by Amato and Cheadle, 2005, showing that divorce affects the well-being of children over 3 generations. In other words, grandparents' decisions to divorce predict less education, greater marital discord, and weaker ties with parents 2 generations later. The study showed how divorce, and possibly other problems correlated with it, in one generation resulted in lower educational attainment in problematic family relationships in the second generation, with these outcomes becoming the causes of similar problems in the third generation. Parents who fight frequently, especially in front of their children, need to know that they increase the risk of a variety of problems, not only for their children, but also for their children's children. Amato and Cheadle, 2005. As therapist, you may be the only one who can tell them this. A suggested intervention. Constance Ahrens, 2007, suggests an intervention in her study looking at long-term implications for children of family ties after divorce, noting that most parents have a short-term, narrow view of the implications of their continuing relationship. It is important that therapists help them to broaden their image of their post-divorce family and examine the implications of their relationship post-divorce. She asks each parent to imagine some years ahead and envision some future event like a graduation or a wedding of a child, and then to ask how they will participate in that shared happy occasion. Parents can be given hope through reassuring them that it is never too late to improve their relationship after divorce. Ahrens, 2007. Make sure both parents understand the importance of the continued involvement of father. We detailed earlier how, after divorce, fathers commonly feel, and sometimes are, less important or meaningful in the lives of their children, especially when they are only allowed limited contact with them. Fathers who may have had a low level of involvement with their children during the marriage are unlikely to fully grasp the implications of low to no involvement post-separation, yet the involvement must happen soon after the separation. Early intervention with fathers has been shown to have a significant impact on increasing their involvement. Cookston, Braver, and Griffin, 2007, and by so doing earlier on, they are likely to have better relationships with their children 20 years later. Ahrens and Tanner, 2003. The relevant interventions here, apart from impressing on fathers the importance of these findings, are those of providing positive role models and helping fathers to improve their parenting skills so that they can have significant relationships with their children. Mothers' relationships with their children are not as negatively affected by divorce, but mothers, too, need to be fully cognizant of the importance of the father's continuing involvement with the children, for the children's sake, not the father's. Although maternal hostility toward allowing sufficient contact has decreased in recent decades, King and Hurd, 1999, some women may still be tempted to play the ugly power control games to limit the father's contact with children. In some cases, the mothers may be genuinely convinced that time with dads would be a bad thing for the kids. Therapists can do much to point out to custodial mothers how children need and benefit from continuing involvement with their father, except, of course, in cases of abuse, violence, or mental health or characterological problems with the father where the child would be unsafe. Mothers need to understand how the nature of the father-child relationship interacts with the co-parenting relationship. In other words, if mothers engage in high levels of parental conflict post-separation, they are inviting loyalty conflicts and huge resentment from their children, even if those problems don't surface immediately. Given that parental conflicts can be organized around contact visitation rights and times and that they can escalate quickly, therapists must be strong in helping the parents to avoid entrenched power struggles. They must impress on mothers, particularly, that their gatekeeping role has a huge impact on the children ultimately, even if it is the father that the mother wishes to get back at or otherwise control. Fathers, too, must examine their role in the perpetuation of power struggles. Ahrens, 2007. Set realistic expectations for how step and blended families will work after a divorce. Parents' energy is often consumed with tending to their myriad needs, including romantic relational ones. Once a parent has become involved with a new partner, he or she tends to be ensconced in a little bubble of romantic bliss. When parents remarry, or even cohabit, they typically believe that their happiness in their new union will automatically be shared by the children that they each bring with them. They typically expect that their separate family units will blend together easily as family. Yet having smooth step and blended family dynamics is one of the greatest challenges for families. When children can't manage to see their new step siblings as real brothers and sisters, a central role for therapists is to help the children and the newly united parents understand the many complex challenges that go with the marriage or repartnering, and aid them in developing realistic expectations for these relationships. Ahrens, 2007, suggests showing the family a diagram of the relationships in the binuclear family or helping the parents to create this, noting all the relationships from the child's point of view. This may help parents understand, for example, that, although they don't feel any relationship to people such as the ex-spouse's new spouse and his or her extended family, their child does, and it is their child who must front up to the relationships during visitations, like it or not. Tell them to be clear. Some parents may score brilliantly at not engaging the child in their interparental battles, only to lose the fight for good adjustment because of poor communication around the nature of the change taking place. We spoke earlier of how young children, particularly, may fantasize that mom and dad will get back together. You can encourage parents not to lose their nerve as they explain to kids what is happening. A wishy-washy, "Daddy's going away for a while" is misleading, giving children false hope of reconciliation that just delays facing all the feelings and facts of the new situation, and their ultimate acceptance of it. In cases where reconciliation may be possible, Wolf and E. advocates pursuing it quietly, without getting the children involved. So you would advise going to counseling or dating the former partner without telling the children until both parties are sure that reconciliation will occur. Get them to talk about it. This point is about parents talking to the children about the separation divorce, not in deprecating ways about the spouse and not in three-dimensional detail, but enough that parents can answer kids' questions, such as why, or did you try to work it out? Encourage parents to give honest answers that do not indulge in oversharing. Children are still children, so treating them as equals or confidants is not appropriate. Trying to be friends with them forces them into the unconscious dynamic of feeling that they have to choose one parent over the other, which sets up loyalty conflicts and ultimately breeds resentment. Wolf and D. urge them to get help. Perhaps some parents are already seeing you for counseling. If the role that you have been in with a parent, such as, say, mediator, precludes you from being their counselor, make a referral to another counselor. Alternatively, in the United States, there are divorce recovery groups such as Divorce Care or Divorce Care for Kids, 12-week programs designed to help parents and kids put the pieces of their lives back together again. Wolf, ND. Help them to recognize the warning signs in the kids as the children's behavior changed in unexplained ways since the separation. A child could either be more withdrawn and sad or be engaging in externalizing behaviors, such as bullying, risky behavior, with alcohol and drugs, sex, or other means. Their appetite or their interest in certain sports, groups, or other activities may have changed. They may be struggling to keep their mind on schoolwork and their grades are going down. Adolescents, especially girls, could develop an eating disorder. Prime parents to see the myriad possibilities for ways in which children who look like they are coping on the surface are actually struggling to deal with the divorce. Wolf, ND. Parents of children of all ages must recognize that children need more time, especially one-on-one time, with both parents now, even though now will be the most challenging period for parents to provide that. Give Kids a Voice. Kelly and Emery, 2003, report on several studies, one in which university students, a full decade after experiencing their parents' divorce, still had feelings of loss. Of 820 students, half indicated that they had wanted to spend more time with their fathers in the years following the divorce, but that their mothers opposed it. Of these students, 70% reported that they would have chosen equal time with each parent, out of 9 choices, and an additional 30% said they would have liked a substantial number of overnights with their fathers. The typical amount of time reported with fathers was every other weekend. Fabricius and Hall, 2000, in Kelly and Emery, 2003. These students' painful longing for their fathers through the years could have been alleviated with more equal, more generous visiting arrangements, but they did not get the choice. Similarly, children often feel that they are not consulted and thus have no control with respect to 2 other aspects. 1. Being informed about the divorce and its implications for their lives, and 2. Making transitions between households. The opportunity to give input into how the living arrangements are working for them or not, particularly as children move into the teenage years, may determine whether children have lingering painful or angry feelings long after the divorce has been finalized. In the investigation of Dunn, Davis, O'Connor, and Sturgis, 2001, 25% of young respondents had some too many negative feelings about transitions between households. 73% had some too many positive feelings about the transitions. There was a significant correlation between positive feelings about transitions and being given a role in or some decision making about the transitions. As an advising therapist, you would not want children to be given age-inappropriate responsibility for making a choice between their 2 parents, but you may have a role in pointing out that giving children the right to be heard, with care and sensitivity, can do much to assuage feelings of being out of control, of a loss of sense of self, and of not being valued or loved. Help them to distinguish between pathology and pain. Throughout this course, we have mostly been considering the question of the effects on children of divorce from the perspective of risk and resilience factors, leading to a sense of how well or poorly adjusted they are at some stage after the divorce, that is, in the short, medium, or longer term. While that is the key question, and one which parents, too, will be asking in their concern about whether or not the divorce has hurt their children psychologically, there is another dimension to consider, one which can keep us from inadvertently collapsing responses into the pathology basket when it is inappropriate to do so. That third dimension is an acknowledgement that many children of divorce continue into their adult years to have painful memories. They have experienced a divorce which has engendered lingering feelings of sadness, longing, worry, and regret. Yet, interestingly, these coexist with those individuals' competent psychological and social functioning. Thus, although we must concede that such children had a rough go and were deeply affected by their parents' divorce, we cannot say that they are maladjusted as a result. A study supporting this formulation was conducted by Lawman, Billings, and Emery, 2000. 10 years after experiencing their parents' divorce, high-functioning university students reported continued pain and distress about the divorce. They reported more painful childhood feelings and experiences than control students in still married families. The children of divorced parents worried about things such as their parents attending major events and wanting to spend more time with their fathers. They did not blame themselves for the divorce, and 4 out of 5 of them believed that the divorce was right for their parents. Most of these students missed not having their father around, with loss being the most prevalent feeling. Many questioned whether their father loved them. Despite all the painful feelings, these students did not differ on standardized measures of depression or anxiety from a comparison sample of students whose parents were still married. Lawman, Billings, and Emery, 2000. Thus, if you are a therapist for a parent in angst over their child's psychological health following on from a separation, you may be able to help them assuage their concern, acknowledging painful feelings that their children have expressed, guiding them as to how to validate the feelings, and yet simultaneously seeing and help the children to see that, despite it being a rough time, the kids are coping well. This brings us to our last message for parents. Don't let them see their children as victims. This point is for parents, and is also a message for children, those adult children who have survived a divorce. When such individuals end up in your room seeking professional help, it is likely that they will see their life course at least partially through the prism of the divorce. For parents and children alike, a divorce creates a hugely distressing series of transitions to be adjusted to, but some of the labels used to describe this population can be pathologizing. For example, adult children of divorce. ACT sounds too similar to adult children of alcoholics and may send a message to such people that they are victims. Bernstein, 2007. To counteract this tendency toward stereotypic messages, and to help young adults or their parents who will help the young adults directly move toward resilience, you can positively identify the strengths that the young person is demonstrating. Through their experiences, many will have gained much cognitive and other flexibility, capacity to function autonomously, and sense of how to deal with crises, where they still struggle with aspects of intimacy, trust, and other interpersonal issues. You can help them to explore more effective ways of coping, facilitating their search for positive models of how to resolve relational issues in what are inevitably complex families, through remarriages and repartnering. Ahrens, 2007. Messages for children. Some writers have age-specific advice to help children move through a divorce to a state of relative good adjustment on the other side. The advice underscores what we have been saying throughout the course, that children need to know they are loved and they need to be protected from being party to parental conflict. If you are working with a child as your client, in addition to or through his or her parents, here are some of the messages that you can give them, backing up what you have encouraged their parents to say to them. Helping preschoolers through divorce. Your very young client needs to be told clearly and frequently that mom and dad still love them and will take care of them. You can tell them that they are still a family, even if dad, typically, will be living somewhere else now. You can work out with the child's parents a simple way to explain what happened, and agree that you will all be on message in giving this explanation to the child. The essence of it is that the problems are between mom and dad, and that the breakup is not the fault of the child. Even if as he had behaved perfectly, it still would have happened. In the counseling room, young children can be encouraged to enact their fears in free play sessions or with a sand tray, with plenty of opportunities for them to identify and express feelings. If there is any concern that the child is being exposed to intense conflict or violence, you can help ensure the child's safety, while reiterating to parents the ultra importance of them setting a good example in regard to control of their anger while around the other parent. Also, you may need to advocate for the child to have time with a non-resident parent more often than the typical every other weekend, as even a week is too long for very young children to go without one of their parents, and a fortnightly schedule does not suit their age or developmental needs. Gordon and Arbuthnot, 2018. Working with young children, ages 6-8. While young school children can understand more than their preschool counterparts, they have the same basic needs: to know that their parents still love them and that they will be taken care of. Despite the new reality that mom and dad will not be living together, they also still need protection from the anger and other hurts of parents. Children of this age need to be able to spend time often with the non-resident parent. What begins to come into focus more clearly now is the possibility for conflicts of loyalty. Thus, it may be part of your role in free play, sand tray, or other conversations with a child of this age to reinforce that it is okay to love both parents, and certainly the absent one. Doubt about their own lovability encroach on the happiness of children at this age. You can be instrumental in ensuring them that their parents do, indeed, love them, while identifying to parents that children of this age need even more love and support now. You may also need to steer back toward reality any fantasies that their parents will get back together. Gordon and Arbuthnot, 2018. Guiding preteens, ages 9-12, through divorce. As children stand on the threshold of adolescence, they are beginning to have the capacity for a longer-term vision of their life, and they are more articulate than when they were younger. These developments mean that they now want to talk not only about the breakup itself, but also about life beyond the breakup. They want to express their fears, their concerns, and their complaints. They are now old enough to see a bit of mom's side of things, and a bit of dad's side as well, but they typically cannot hold both of those at the same time, swinging back and forth between the two. Thus, it is ultra important now for them to not hear criticisms of one parent or the other, and to be given permission to freely love both parents, without feeling guilty that they are taking the side of one or the other in doing so. In working with this age, you can articulate that mom and dad clearly do not agree on everything, but that they agree that they both love the kids. Children at this age, like their younger, ages 6 to 8, siblings, may yearn for their parents to get back together. This rarely happens, of course, and part of how you can help may be to gently dispel false hopes in that regard. Recall that part of your message to parents is that they not delay the children's adjustment through hinting at the possibility of reconciliation when the parents know it isn't possible. A therapeutically valid way to help preteens face the reality of the now absent parent is to encourage them to take time, perhaps in session, to call, write letters, or create gifts for the absent parent for special days such as birthday, Christmas, or Father's Day. You would need to check this out with the resident parent beforehand, as some resident parents may still be opposed to children having contact with a non-resident parent. The injunction to parents not to criticize, complain about, or engage in conflict with each other in front of the children still holds for this age group. And now you may be able to explain to parents how important it is for them to model good relating when they are with each other, simply because children learn interpersonal skills in part by observing how conflicts get resolved, with attention to negotiation and compromise. Moreover, you can let parents know that you would like to grow the social development of preteens in session by helping them to identify all the ways and times in which mom and dad were polite and respectful with one another, even though they disagree on some things and are divorcing or and Arbuthnot, 2018. In many cases, the level of hostility towards one another will be too high, and this will not be possible. But where it is, you can point out to parents what an invaluable gift they give to their child through positive role modeling on how to deal with conflict in a high-level manner. You are instrumental in the preteen receiving that gift if you have worked with the child in session to identify the positive parental behaviors. Getting adolescents through the divorce as children move into their teens, and particularly their upper teen years, they are capable of increasingly deep and logical thought. The psycho-spiritual work of adolescence is that of individuation, gaining an ever deeper sense of themselves and their place in life. Thus, their irritating plays for independence, sometimes expressed through rebellion and acting out, are the developmental work that they need to be doing. If the teen was not acting distant and defiant in regard to family before, they surely begin to do so post-separation, not least because they tend to feel less commitment to family rules and protocols when the divorce is seen as a breach of commitment by their parents to a lifelong family structure. There is more intense desire now to act in ways that further their self-interest, and gaining their cooperation is not always easy. Picard, 2011. Your role in this tapestry of interwoven needs is to be the steady hand that acknowledges the change and the teen's growing need for autonomy, and simultaneously helps them to see that with independence comes responsibility. Your job may be to nail down practical, age-appropriate ways in which the teen can take on added responsibility for themselves and also commitments to help out at a time when the family needs more assistance. When teens need help themselves, how can they ask for it in a way which helps parents to hear it through all the noise of the parents' readjustment? You can coach them in recognizing the needs for support, reassurance, and security that they still have, despite the teen putting on a game face of blustering independence. You can coach them to ask for those needs to be met in a clear, assertive, relational way. Finally, a parental breakup can be a hit to teens' understanding about how good relationships are constituted. You can help them identify strengths in the patterns of their family dynamic, including habits of mom and dad and also their own burgeoning interpersonal skills. Smoothing the divorce transition for adult children. If you receive into your rooms a 20 or 30-something who is distressed and perplexed by their parents' divorce and or repartnering, your first task is to recognize the multiplicity of issues which could be disturbing them. As we noted in the previous chapter, adult children whose middle-aged parents come apart still feel the anger, sadness, and disappointment that young children feel. They may not have a judge telling them that they can only see their father, for example, 4 days a month, but they may still have loyalty and visitation issues. They may want to wonder with you what happened, and why. They, like younger children, may feel vaguely guilty wondering in the adult's case if the parents merely remain together for the sake of the children, denying themselves for so long the happiness that only now they can claim with them, the children, grown and gone. In these instances, your role will still be that of the listening post that provides reassurance and reminders that it is their parents' business, their parents' decision. The divorce was not the children's fault, nor was it their prerogative to influence the marriage. In cases where the adult child questions his or her ability to sustain an intimate romantic relationship over the long period, you can help them bring up memories of times that were good in their family of origin and have been good in their own relationships. You can help them see the value of working prophylactically to keep their relationship alive and vibrant, prioritizing attitudes and actions that keep them loving and valuing the other person as they grow together from a broad base of commonality. It is a different kettle of fish if you are called upon to help an adult child whose parents have recently divorced and are now in the process of repartnering. Sadly, for many families, there are not only the already complex issues of accepting the step-parents and step-siblings or perhaps half-siblings. This is difficult enough on a relational level, but there are a whole host of legal issues as well, as some adult children who are counting on getting a certain share of their older parents' inheritance must face that parents' holdings could now go to a new spouse, often one much younger, and who may have multiple offspring from previous marriages who would eventually receive any inheritance from your client's parent. Your role in such a circumstance may be first that of referral service to a family lawyer who could clarify where children of the first marriage might legally stand. You would be unethical to dispense any legal advice without being trained as a lawyer. The more subtle aspect is how an adult child in this situation can find peace of mind, a sense of trust, and a way of being with the partnered parent and his/her new family without poisoning relationships by worrying about future aspects such as wills. Once the adult child's legal position is clarified, you can help the person develop a plan of action which is likely to include open and candid communication with the parent at some stage. The adult child may also need to work through interpersonal issues of trust, abundance, and boundaries if they continue to be upset about future possibilities arising from their parents' present life. Changes at systemic or institutional levels. Throughout these pages, we have been hammering home the point that the most helpful interventions for children impacted by a divorce are those which seek to contain parental conflict, promote close and authoritative relationships between both parents and their children, including through open, non-defensive communication, and give children a voice where appropriate in access and other arrangements. Some of the community-level interventions that try to achieve these goals are parent education programs for parents and children, divorce mediation, collaborative lawyering, judicial settlement conferences, parenting coordinator or arbitration programs for chronically litigating parents, family and group therapy for children and parents. Kelly and Emery, 2003. Not all of these options exist in every community, but the more you are familiar with what is available, the more helpfully you can steer clients as appropriate. Every case is different. Summary and concluding thought. Summary: this course has examined the impact of divorce on children and how therapists can help those children, both directly and indirectly through their parents, move through the transition toward high-level adjustment in the next phase and beyond. It is no small undertaking, in that half of marriages in the United States end in divorce, with about half of those divorces involving children. Rather than see divorce as a one-off phenomenon, we have attempted to look at it as a series of transitions. The more there are, the more challenging the child's adjustment. Rather than explain research findings through a particular theoretical lens, we have discussed it through a framework of divorce grave risk or resiliency grave adjustment. First, we detailed the typical reactions of each age band of child to a parental separation or divorce. The risk factors which engender stress and possibly poorer outcomes for children include receiving poor or little communication about the separation, coping with the departure of one parent and shuttling back and forth between residences, being caught in the middle of intense parental conflict, receiving poor parenting after the divorce, losing important relationships, financial strain and reduced standard of living, and having to adjust to new partners of a parent. The protective factors, which facilitate post-separation resilience, include competent parenting, active non-resident parenting, joint custody, reduced parental conflict, and certain qualities in children themselves. Finally, we examined how therapists can help facilitate resilience in children affected by divorce, with 3 levels of intervention: messages for parents, messages for children directly, and through working at an institutional level. Concluding thought: while there are many contradictory findings among the burgeoning base of studies examining the effect on children of divorce, all of the research agrees that divorce is a big deal. It brings about many changes and losses for parents and for children. It is the end of a marriage and may also mean the loss of a home, the loss of friends, and the loss of social status. It can mean losing one's school, losing frequent contact with one parent, and possibly losing some of the time, attention, discipline, and loving gestures formerly given by both parents. It is the end of a role of wife or husband and is likely also to mean the loss of hopes and dreams for both parents and children. Thus, to fully respect our clients going through divorce, we must ensure that they are given the opportunity to grieve, each in their own way, for the losses. The problem is that, unlike with a physical death, there is not a body to cry over and there are few, if any, traditions to support, direct, and encourage the grieving and eventual healing. There is no funeral and people don't bring food, flowers, and support. If anything, sources of support go away. Beyond that, many people do not recognize that they or their children are in grief and needing to take time to mourn. The intense emotions which do surface, such as anger, may mask the deeper, unexpressed feelings of grief and make it more difficult to support affected individuals. But help them grieve we must, as much as the many transitions of divorce may hurt those affected. It is possible to experience a good divorce and move on from that, ultimately becoming adjusted to the new reality. A good divorce, as we have seen in these pages, is one in which good parenting by both parents continues after the separation, in which children are protected from intense parental conflict, and in which children can comfortably maintain relationships with both parents, coming to have adequate relationships with new step-kin. It is, insofar as possible, a divorce in which children's voices are heard and they are given a say in these matters which are so close to the heart.
Whoever like it.